Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the next edition of Untold Stories in Hiring Tech. My name is Deborah. I'm the head of talent acquisition at OfferZen, and I'm going to be hosting your show today. So before we get into the really meaty bits, if we could just go through a couple of house rules. I know they're pretty boring, but something we've got to do. So first of all, remember that you can see us. We cannot see you. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, you can post them in the questions tab on the right-hand side. If you do happen to drop off, and typical here in South Africa, we've got load shedding, so I am hosting from my phone at this second, so hopefully I don't drop off. But if you do, you can come back anytime via the live Storm link. We're also going to be taking some questions at the end of the event. So if we don't get to your question while we're chatting, we will cover that at the end and hopefully we get through all of them. And then finally, you can use the chat tab on the right where you can ask any questions, share any links, any facts. And I'd really, really love it if we could maybe take a chance to try some of that out. Maybe you can take a moment to introduce yourself. That would be amazing. I would like to see a couple of people maybe introducing themselves, drop your name, drop your location. If you're really eager to connect with some of our fellow people in the room, you can maybe drop in your LinkedIn profile. Let's give it a bash. Hey, from Amsterdam. Awesome to see you. Let's try a couple more before we move on. From Cape Town. Yep. Seems like our typical locations, Amsterdam and Cape Town, are rocking it. Do we have any other people besides from South Africa and Amsterdam? That's where our two offices are, so it makes a lot of sense that we're seeing a few of you. Joburg. Hey, Pretoria. Awesome to see all of you. Berlin. Hi, Julie. Eindhoven. Hi. Chaiwen from Eindhoven. And from Norway. Hi, Felix. Awesome. Seems to be working. You guys are doing great. A big hello to all the corners of the world. And yep, let's see. I think that worked pretty well. So we know how the chat works. For some people that haven't done it, let's check one or two other things out. I'd love to try a bit of a poll, if that's possible. The poll is on your right-hand side. I'd like to see how that's working for you. I'd love to know from the people in the room, what interests you about Untold Stories tonight? What is it about the subject? If you could submit your vote, and let's just check how we're doing on that side. So submit your own. I'm going to be submitting my own vote, and I'm going to tell you what interests me. Personally, really, finding out how to hire remotely is what I'm into. I really would love to find out all those tricks and tips around that. Cool. Let's see how the poll is going. Awesome. Fantastic, guys. We've got the poll in. I'll give you some of the results a little bit later. Great stuff. So before we get going, I just want to give you guys a little bit, for those of you who don't know who OfferZen is as yet, let me allow to do a little quick introduction. So OfferZen is a community-first job marketplace. It's helping over 100,000 developers across Europe and Africa at the moment to find their dream jobs and for companies to find their dream developers. We're made for developers by developers. If any of you know our founders, Phil and Milan, you'll know that's absolutely true. So we know firsthand what is really, really important in the tech job world. So we've got, how we do this, we've got over 2,000 companies that accelerate their hiring of developers via the OfferZen platform. Our platform is to help recruiters, hiring managers, and their teams by giving direct weekly access to developers, not just access to them, but they're active on the market at that particular time. We reduce the time to hire. We currently have an average of 25 days from the time that you reach out to somebody, reach out to a top developer before they're actually hired. And we make tech hiring absolutely frictionless. So there's no middlemen, there's no upfront costs, And really, we are the connector of both of those parties. So companies actively connect with developers who are seeking jobs in Europe, in South Africa, and obviously, while we're talking tonight about is looking at remote jobs as well. So we actually turn the usual job platform on its head. So what that means is that companies actually apply to candidates and they make that matching happen so much faster. So basically, if you're ready to build your tech team, OfferZen can make it happen without this sounding like a bit of a sales speech. Unfortunately, we always do it because who knows, you might not know who OfferZen is. We actually can even do this right now. You can click on the link in the chat to connect with us. We can get started, or we can do it again at the end of this webinar. That would be fantastic. So there's a link. We've just dropped it in. If you do want to meet with us at a later stage, just click on that. Fantastic. Okay, so as mentioned, as a community-driven platform, we are community-driven. We help developers and hiring professionals level up their careers and events. And just like tonight's event, we're talking about in Untold Stories, is we are literally just looking at how can we do this remote hiring even more successfully. We've also, we think we know you probably know us from a little bit of swag. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may own it, and we share that with our community as well. It becomes super popular, people love our swag. And then Untold Stories, which is for our community, is really a way of us gathering the hiring tech team as a community and really reaching out to each other and understanding and connecting with people who need to tackle the same problems. So that's why we're here today. So just chatting about remote hiring, looking at how to make use of the global tech talent pool by hiring remotely and doing so with less worries, because I'm sure you probably have some of those. That's why you're here. It doesn't come as a surprise that actually over the last 2 years, considering COVID, all the changes that have happened, that over 70% of workers globally want to work in a flexible remote working option. And they want this to continue. They don't want to go back to how it was. So for us as recruiters, tech companies, it basically means the best part is that we have got more access to talent across the world. But hiring remotely, and I've experienced this myself as head of talent at OfferZen, can be pretty nerve-wracking. Lots of questions, concerns can come up. And luckily for tonight, we don't need to have much fear because we're actually chatting to an expert who has actually done this before. He's an expert in growing organizations internationally he knows pretty much almost everything about remote hiring, and he's going to help us. So let's have a little bit of a look of how to avoid something like misclassification, how to compliantly scale in a remote setting, something that made my tummy turn a few times thinking about that, and what's important in creating a remote dream job, because it's not just about attracting them, it's about keeping the people and keeping them in that dream job. So our speaker, who has a few things prepared for us, and hold yourself because this is awesome. We are going to be getting the most out of this webinar. He's going to be providing us with a remote hiring framework. He's also going to be giving us a checklist for compliant hiring. Believe me, I am definitely going to be pulling this into our hiring process and making sure that we are going to be making use of this as well. So we're going to be sharing these with you at the end of the webinar. Awesome stuff. So just a quick reminder, if anybody joined us a couple of minutes late, I'm Deborah Watts, not Dobra, I'm Deborah Watts. I'm the head of talent acquisition at OfferZen. I'm going to be your host for tonight. I am going to be welcoming our speaker for the day, Matt Manette. He's the country lead and head of expansion of UK and Ireland at Deal. So welcome, Matt. Come on. So excited about our chat today.
Guys, looking forward to it.
Wow. Where are you?
Yeah, right now, usually I'm based in London, North London, but with the perks of remote working and working wherever, I'm currently back home visiting my family in Canada. So at present, I'm in my my mother's basement. So yeah, It's very nostalgic. I haven't been down here in probably 15 years, but yeah, it's a perk of visiting home. We
It's
did
super
have
appropriate.
it is, yeah, very topical right now. So I have a pretty funny setup right now. Obviously, I'm used to being in like a home office, so I have some lamps behind me to create this triple shadow effect that you usually get in professional studios. So bear with me. And with obviously being in Canada, we did have a little bit of a crazy windstorm over the weekend, so the Wi-Fi and power has been on and off. But I hope everything will be status quo for this call. So yeah, happy to be here.
So from windstorms in Canada to load shedding in South Africa, here
Yeah,
we
exactly,
are. So all
exactly.
good.
We do what we can. We do what we can.
Awesome. So actually, before we jump into like the meat of our topic, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Because we're chatting about remote growth and tech hiring, you're the guy. So if you give us a little bit of an intro, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're putting the pressure on me. But yeah, my name is Matt Minette. I'm the country lead and head of expansion for the UK and Ireland at Deal. What Deal does, if you're not familiar with it, we enable companies to go ahead and hire and pay full-time employees and contractors anywhere in the world. And we have a few different kind of hiring or employment models that we'll kind of discuss throughout this call as the questions come up, I'm sure. But we were founded in 2019, and since then we've gone from probably two employees, the two co-founders, to over 1,000 employees in 65 different countries. So some pretty crazy growth since 2019. We were
Wow.
most recently recognized as one of the fastest growing tech companies of all time. I'm not sure who's keeping track of every single tech company of all time, but from zero to over 1,000 employees, and from zero to over 100 million in annual recurring revenue in 20 months. I'm sure that probably puts us at top of a list. So hey, we'll take the recognition at the very least.
Sure. Well, you definitely then seem to be the man we need to be chatting to and
Yeah,
to tap into that brain juice for sure.
for sure,
Awesome.
absolutely.
What would be super awesome is to understand maybe some of the highlights and decisions or actions that you felt have been most influential to get you to where you are today. It would be awesome to just hear a little bit more personal stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the topic today is very topical and kind of, a personal story as well, being able to go ahead and work remotely. Again, being from Canada, Canada's obviously got its tech hubs like Toronto, Waterloo, Ontario, and what have you. But when I was with my previous employer, I had the opportunity of going ahead and moving to the UK to help open an office there for that company. And it was my first time at really kind of expanding my horizons to what work could be or where I could work. And it was less traditional at that point. It was one of those big tech companies that had all the benefits of going into the office, having ping pong tables, barista, snacks everywhere, and I loved it. And it wasn't until moving to the UK that I really realized that you can get a lot done by working from a cafe or a table in your living room, or jumping to Spain for a weekend break and then extending it for a few days. So for me, I think what really opened my horizon and what kind of made me excel in my career was taking that chance and taking that opportunity to potentially go abroad and kind of take that gamble, and kind of leap into the unknown. So that's definitely been a highlight of mine. Again, coming from Canada where you get 20 feet of snow in the winter, moving to the UK was a big kind of change for me. Now I deal with 20 inches of rain every day, but it's been quite fun. It's been quite nice, and now I call it home. So I think that's been kind of a highlight of my career and a decision that I made that was a gamble and a risk. Coming from again kind of a smaller city in Canada that didn't have a lot of tech going on at the time, to being in one of the biggest tech hubs in Europe, and being able to expand a company's footprint there was definitely probably a highlight of my career so far, and it's only gotten better joining Deal as well. So.
Awesome. And if you had to look at the personal benefits that you've kind of gained from working remotely, is there anything that you can highlight, like that has
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
made life
Absolutely.
better?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, you know, I think like, benefits for remote hire, like remote working, I think differ from like person to person, right? And I don't have children at home. I do have a puppy that's 9 months old. Her name's Harlow. She's an Irish Terrier, and she's an absolute maniac. And then I have a hairless cat named Eugene, who usually photobombs these sorts of videos and jumps on my shoulder. He usually has a jumper because he's cold, so he's always trying to like get on your neck and stuff like that. So I think one of the benefits of being able to work remote, coming out of the pandemic and continuing on, is that you can go ahead and invest time where you think it matters, whether it be spending time with your animals or your loved ones. In the middle of the day, if I feel like I need a little bit of a mental break, I can always jump out and go for a walk in my neighborhood with my dog, or spend time with my partner, go for a walk, do those sorts of things that you typically can't do during the day. And I think the biggest thing, it's really kind of built up the mental health aspect of work and working hard. You can kind of do the things that you need to do throughout the day from a personal level, but you can also do it from a career perspective as well, and add in a little bit more time. I think the standard workday doesn't need to be 9 to 5. It could be 5 to 8 a.m. when you do your best work, and then take a 2-hour break, and then jump back in and continue on. So for me, it's really been able to structure my day, my time, my energy the way that I seem fit. I don't have anyone looking over my shoulder. I don't have, an office to travel into. So the time that I get to spend on with the people or the things that matter has been, a massive benefit to me. If someone were to tell me that I had to go back into the office, I'd probably say no. I probably, wouldn't be with that company anymore, just because the benefits do far outweigh, the office culture and what have you. And this is, coming from a traditional kind of like old school, salesperson that would be like, no, you have to be in the office. You'd have to be there 9 to 5. You have to, listen to people's call shadowing, all that sort of stuff. So my opinion on it has changed drastically over the last couple of years. So yeah, that's the biggest benefit to me. It's really that personal time that you get back in the day.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I found the same for myself, so makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Something I just wanted to like bounce off you. So if I understand, Deal obviously specializes in helping companies hire tech remotely. Or no, hire remotely, not just tech, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Anywhere, anyone, anywhere.
Anyone, anywhere. We specialize in the tech side, so great marriage. We technically see remote as an actual location, if that makes sense, or category. So if somebody's looking for work and they select like remote, we kind of see it as a location. When we did our office in survey in the Netherlands, it kind of showed us that 9 out of like 10 developers were working in some kind of remote setup. When we broke it down, if you look at it, like 70% of developers are kind of doing hybrid work, both office and remotely, and 21% are working fully remotely at the moment. If you look at those kinds of stats, and if this is the new normal that's going to be staying around, which it definitely seems it's going to be, how does the remote hiring process differ from a local hiring process?
Yeah, great question. I think from a local hiring process, it typically means that a company has an entity and a footprint within that region. So they're very well informed of what needs to happen to onboard that individual, what benefits that they're going to be enrolled in, all kind of the standard flow of things. And where remote hiring has kind of changed that is that a lot of companies are now looking for talent anywhere, right? They'll go ahead and say, well, we need to go ahead and hire this full stack developer, or we've had these job openings open in our, headquartered country or region for 6 months, and we can't find the right person. We're giving up on the role, and for one last Hail Mary's sake, we're going to go ahead and open this up to remote, or go ahead and allow people to apply from anywhere. And then they start getting all these applicants, and then they realize, well, we have no idea how to potentially hire this person in, South Africa, or yeah, there we go, or the UK or Spain or wherever. How do we do this? How do we navigate it? And I think the biggest thing is there's a couple ways to hire, right? You can go ahead and hire a contractor, which means that when you hire the contractor, let's say you're paying them 10,000 euros per month, let's say. You pay that 10,000 euros, it's up to the contractor to remit the taxes and make sure that they adhere to the mandatory taxes in said region. A lot of times companies don't want to take the risk of going and paying a contractor and running into things like misclassification, which again we'll talk about, and I'll share kind of a blueprint with everyone after. And then the second route is, okay, we want to hire this person, we want to hire them as a full-time employee, but we don't have an entity, so that means we have to build and set up an entity from scratch. And then they go ahead and hire the legal professionals, they get lawyers involved, they hire an HR person who's well versed on the mandatory benefits and the taxes in the region. So that way they're, all above board, everything's status quo. And that's typically, quite time consuming, and it's a massive resource and it's quite exhaustive. sorry, is exhaustive on resources. So they
Yeah.
typically then go ahead and say, well, we're not going to do that. So what we see is companies consult with us to go ahead and hire those individuals to our entities and then contract them out to them through the employer of record model. So
Right.
from a hiring perspective, it should almost look exactly the same. You should always be looking to hire the individual for the talent, or the knowledge that they bring forward, and then essentially, I don't want to say like offloading, but essentially putting the onus of the tax and the benefits on someone like a deal, or there's quite a few out of them. I'd love to just sell a deal all day to you guys, but there's other vendors out there that do the same. But ultimately, what's allowed us to go ahead and scale quite quickly is that we'll advise you on what to watch out for, what to go ahead and enroll the person in, to make sure that you're just focused on filling that role and getting the best person in the job versus bringing the person to the job, right? So it's different in the sense that you're not going to know all the answers. We're going to advise you on the answers. So just worry
Right.
about finding the right person, and then everything else, we can take care of.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So, sorry, I'm just having a quick read here. We do have a question from the audience that sort of fits really great here. Like, how are local authorities responding to remote work? Are they making it easier? Are they making it harder for local people to work remotely? And that's just popped the question in here. Fits quite well in this section.
Yeah, so in terms of how the authorities are looking at remote working, it really depends, right? So I think the biggest thing is, as long as the tax authorities are aware that the person's going to be working in said region,
Mm-hmm.
um, then it's fine, right? So there's two ways of looking at it. From a contractor perspective, if I'm a contractor that lives in the UK and I move to Spain for extended period, obviously the UK is going to say, hey, we want your money. You have to remit your taxes in this country. And then if I go ahead and say, well, I've actually been living in Spain, then I might be double taxed, or depending on the tax treaty, you have to go and adhere to that. But from a full-time employee perspective, where you're potentially using something like a deal, where again you're hired to that entity, it's up to the employer. So it's up to deal to remit taxes on your behalf to the tax authorities. So as long as the tax authorities are getting their share,
Yeah.
and the company that's employing you is adhering to the necessary legislation and laws and enrolling you in the mandatory benefits in said region, typically there's no issue. I mean, we have over 150,000 users of our platform,
Mm-hmm.
7,000 corporate clients, and we've never had a single issue as it relates to that thus far. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. But as long as they get their share and everything's compliant, there's not a lot to worry about.
So, yeah, I was just like having a thought while you were mentioning that. So, would you recommend that if you're actually using, so you would go potentially into a new area, work with a partner like Deal, understand the structures, etc. Is there a point where you would get to know it really well and then exit it? Or is it something that you then just continue the partnership with because in the long run, because of changes in legals and all of that, it would make sense that the experts deal with that stuff?
Yeah, it really depends. I think we work with a lot of different companies that have different size, kind of entities and kind of growth plans, right? So for a lot of companies, um, especially in the SMB space, they may need to go ahead and hire someone in a region, and they want to basically test the waters to see if it's viable to build a team there. So they'll go ahead and remote relocate, let's say 10 people, and then they'll use Deal for a year, 2 years. And let's say that team does really well, and they don't plan on extending it any further, then they'll typically continue to use Deal. At a certain point, though, very large enterprises, if we think about some of our logos like Shopify, Reddit, Coinbase, crypto.com, whomever, a lot of times they're going ahead and expanding into new regions. And between the 0 to 6 month mark, they have to go through the legal process of setting up entities. However, they don't want to be handcuffed to not expanding into that region in the meantime. So they'll go ahead and use someone like a Deal for that kind of bridge, and then potentially open their own entity. We work with just about every company that looks to expand, whether it be through kind of natural progression, and kind of growth, or through M&As and what have you. So it's a mixed bag. I'm actually surprised that the mix of companies we can advise on that as well. Sometimes they do have plans to go ahead and open their own entities, and then they find that using Deal to manage it end to end is far less worrisome. Obviously, we own the employee relationship to a certain degree. So the risk is on us, it's not on them. And everything's, of course, set up compliantly. We work with all the governments in these areas to set up our entities, and they, of course, review our business plans. So they're
Mhm.
very aware that we're going to be hiring these employers of record on behalf of other companies. So it's a mix, but it really depends on what their growth plans are overall.
Okay, that makes good sense. We've got a cool question here from someone in the audience, Amy, about the differences between normal and remote hiring processes. Her question is, how does the remote hiring process for exec level employees differ? Does it differ?
Ooh, it can, that's for sure. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is it really depends on the benefits, right? So, if we go ahead and look at the UK as a whole, quite a few of the conversations we're having right now are with execs in the UK that are, part of larger organizations, and they go ahead and say, "Well, I've lived, in Spain during the pandemic, and I miss the warm weather. How do I get back there?" And then companies, use Deal to potentially navigate how to assist with that. And the biggest question that comes up is, the benefits. Like, what do I have in Spain or this country, and what do I have where I am now that I'm potentially missing out on? And it's a little tricky because each country has their own list of benefits, right? So if I'm potentially on, NHS and then I have a pension in the UK and my company might match it, when you go to Spain, you may not have a private healthcare or the NHS. You may not have a pension scheme that your company can go ahead and put money into. And then if you
Mm.
use someone like a Deal, well, that if your company continues to pay into your pension, well, then that means that they're the employer and we're not, which opens you up to things like misclassification risk or, some kind of some barriers of and some risk. So on that, it's typically case by case. I'd say that's the biggest thing is really looking at the benefits. But
Right.
there's obviously things that you can do to circumvent that, such as making a benefit plan that is for remote employees or for these transplants where you're potentially giving them, funds to pay for their gym membership or a wellness allowance or learning or whatever it might be, where it could be a stipend that they have to submit, receipts for. So the benefits would look different. I'd say that's probably the biggest question that comes up. But overall, if you're going to be trading in, the rain for, palm
Right.
trees and a drink with a little umbrella in it, then you're probably going to be okay cutting out some benefits to a certain degree.
Okay. So technically there aren't major differences for executives, but there could be these ad hoc kind of situations. You do it like on
Exactly.
a one-on-one kind of basis in that case. Okay. Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah.
fantastic. Cool. So something, I'm not quite sure if we're showing a checklist now. If we are, great. If not, we will do something around chatting around misclassification. So it's a word I hear often, and
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know exactly what that means, but definitely from my side, I didn't know it was called misclassification, but if that's the word, tackling a perceived challenge that we experience when we're thinking about hiring remotely, or basically some of the fears that we slash recruitment, HR, talent organizations have is staying compliant. I mean, that's like a major concern when you're hiring remotely and making sure that we avoid misclassification. Can you firstly explain what is misclassification? And then we'll chat about some of the mistakes we're making in misclassification.
Absolutely. So misclassification summarized is when you're hiring a contractor, not a full-time employee, you're hiring a contractor, but they're effectively recognized as a full-time employee based on benefits or based on things that you provide to the individual. And it
Mm-hmm.
could be that you're potentially paying into things like pension, or you're not, or you could be remitting taxes for them in error, which then obviously flags the authorities that this person is actually a full-time employee. They're not a sole contractor or sole proprietor. Therefore, they should be recognized as a full-time employee and be measured to pay in all the mandatory benefits in that region, which is not good to you because it then opens you up to risk and fines and what have you. So that's kind of it summarized in a very simple term, if I can.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that is definitely some of the stuff that pops into your head. So that's good to know. And are there any, mentioning like biggest mistakes around misclassification? Like, what are the mistakes that?
Yeah. Yeah, we see this quite a bit actually. So I think the biggest mistakes, right? If you really think about like what a contractor versus a full-time employee does. So I think the first thing is, we assuming that 90% of the people on this call are probably full-time employees. When you start with a company, they typically bring you through like onboarding. They send you like a laptop, or they give you a physical laptop. You go into the office. They go ahead and give you a bunch of benefits. They enroll you in the mandatory benefits in the region, all those sorts of things. Where it differs from a contractor perspective is that when a company goes ahead and gives you like a physical laptop or physical property from that company, then it typically means you're a full-time employee. It could be as small as that. It could be going ahead and giving you like a company car, company credit card, anything essentially tied to the company that basically shows that you're essentially like an employee to a certain degree, and you're using the physical items that the company has given out. So what typically sets these kind of alarms off are when the job scope of the individual is potentially not contractor focused. So it's not clear if they are a full-time employee and contractor. So that's often why a lot of companies use deals, because we have compliant contracts set out in 150 plus different countries that basically outline everything from start to finish, putting the risk on the contract and not on the individual. We work with over 220 different law firms to ensure that all of our contracts are compliant. So that way the individual is not going to run into any issue, and the company is not going to run into any issues. So it could be the wording on the contract. It could be, again, the company going ahead and giving a laptop to an individual. So we use partners for on deal. So when someone goes ahead and hires a contractor on the platform, they can go ahead and get that contractor to either purchase a laptop from the partner, or they can allocate these credits. And these credits can be used to redeem a laptop, or redeem Apple AirPods or whatever it is. So that company property is sent through the partner, not the actual company, then lowering the burden and the risk to the individual as well. So it could be a few things. Again, I'll send over that misclassification risk, but the doc, sorry. But the biggest thing is the verbiage used in the contract, what the relationship will actually look like, what the individual is actually tied to, what the job scope is, and then ultimately what access do they have to the company as a whole. And it's not saying that the individual cannot have ties to the company, like a company email or those sorts of things. It's really kind of a mix of, we'll say, like 3 different things. If they kind of check those 3 boxes, then you're at risk.
Okay, perfect. So as far as I understand, we are going to drop that link in the chat, which is just going to go through. Yes, thank you. Yeah, events link is in there. So you're welcome to pop in there just to get a bit more detail about what we've just been chatting about. Just to chat a little bit more around scaling remotely. From what I've seen, I think you alluded to it at the beginning of our chat, Deal has grown incredibly fast, especially over the last year. And if I remember correctly, you've gone from something like $4 million to around $50 million. I mean, that is crazy. So a fitting question from Joan right at this point is remote a large part of your current talent strategy? And if it is, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so Joan, yes, it's massively a focus for our talent strategy. If anyone goes ahead and visits the Deal website for job postings, I think we have like 220 open right now. I don't think anyone's actually tied to a specific jurisdiction or country. It basically just says like, this is where the focus will be. So for example, for the UK, right, as the country leader of the UK, we're constantly hiring sales reps and customer success managers. But most of them, most of our team now, whether they're, UK nationals and or Brits, but they're located in places like Barcelona or Sevilla or Valencia. So we don't really shy away from remote hiring. We're able to go ahead and hire in just about any country, because if we do that for our clients, then we have to kind of have that same DNA as a business. So we don't shy away from hiring internationally at all. And there was a second part of that question. Apologies. What was the?
No, it really was. Is it part of it?
Oh.
And can you
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's 100% of our focus. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, obviously there's time zone restrictions and what have you to a certain degree, but yeah, we do not shy away from it. It's 100% our focus, and we feel that it should be the same for every company. Bring the job to the individual, not the individual to the job.
Right. Okay. And I mean, selfishly from an Office Zen perspective, no, I'm joking. As partners, I'd like to know how much your tech team has grown over the past year.
Oh man, I honestly I can probably throw a number out there. I'm probably like small. It's probably like 200% higher than whatever I say. So we have a very, very big tech team. I mean, if you think about Deal as a platform, we're constantly adding new product where we've, made some key acquisitions. We probably have, oof, I probably say we added about maybe 300 heads in the last year from a tech perspective. Actually, probably more. I think between probably 300 and 400 heads, and again, that probably makes up about 40% of our company. So we did obviously start from a fairly kind of small. Well, actually, I guess the best reference is when I joined 9 months ago. We had, I think it was a higher 125. Now we're up over 1,000. In that span. I think we have about 50 to 70 new joiners every Monday. So on that, yeah, we've added quite a few heads. So roughly 400, tech focused roles at Deal since then.
Is there any like key to your remote growth, would you say?
Ooh, yeah, I think the key is like create an environment where people want to work is probably the biggest thing, right? So
Yeah.
there's so much competition going on right now in the tech sector, and it's really difficult to stand out. And I think it was, posted a couple of days ago that there's actually more open roles in the UK than there are individuals to fill these roles. So companies need to start going ahead and creating an environment where you're going to be, top of mind for these individuals to apply to. Obviously, there's a massive talent shortage, regardless if you're in the UK or abroad, from a skilled labor professional, specifically in tech and engineering and whatnot. So, from our perspective, tech talent should be interested in being able to work wherever they want to work rather than having to be siloed to an office. And that would probably open up the talent pool quite a bit. But I think the biggest thing and what we've seen from our own studies to LinkedIn studies and surveys is that job seekers around the world are looking for good work-life balance followed by an excellent compensation and benefit package. So if you go ahead and put those in play and obviously really focus on creating a culture around that at your company, then people at your company are going to begin to talk to their friends, other people within their immediate reach. And you're going to get some, strong hires and really good hires, but it obviously starts from within, right? It starts from, the ground up or bottom up, top to bottom, really putting those kind of key pieces in place. But work-life balance is probably the biggest one right now.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, yeah, you mentioned some of the benefits now. We do have a question here from Kerman. How does Deal assist an employee with benefits like medical aid, retirement funds? Companies are using providers within countries the employees based in. So if they're using the locally based benefits organizations, how does Deal kind of deal with that?
Yeah, great question. So every country, again, is fairly nuanced and different from a benefits perspective, right? So some countries go ahead and have, healthcare and benefits that are included in the tax that individuals pay or the companies or the tax the company pays, right? And then other times for maybe even senior executive hires, kind of going back to the last question, these individuals may want to go ahead and have private healthcare added on top, so they're not, waiting in queues, or they can go ahead and get into a doctor same day and what have you. So what we do is we partner with different healthcare providers in these regions that go above and beyond what is required from a mandatory perspective. If for whatever reason healthcare is not included as a mandatory benefit in that country, then of course we know as a company we're going to have to go ahead and provide that privately. So then we go ahead and have different plans that companies can enroll their employees in as well. So again, it's dependent on each country. And I'd say that's probably the biggest request is, when you're relocating to a new place, what happens if I get sick? What happens if my children get sick, my spouse, whomever? So that's probably the biggest ask. And we partner with some big orgs from, Bupa to what's the other one? There's quite a few. There's every country's different, so I won't mess up the names too much, but it's varied.
Okay. So just a very quick reminder, because I think it's really great when we get questions that are kind of fitting to what we're chatting about as we're going through things. So a reminder to the audience, you're welcome to pop in your question into the chats. We'll weave it into the conversation that we're having at the right time. Obviously, if we don't get to them in the conversation, we're going to try and answer as many as we can at the end of the session or end of the webinar. So yeah, just a reminder, pop your questions in there. That would be great. I'm really keen to kind of get back to what we were chatting about just before we went about the benefit question, which was around creating that dream job. I think sometimes lip service is pretty good around like create that dream job. How do you stand out from the crowd when you're trying to attract remote talent?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that kind of coincides with like how to retain talent, right? Like obviously you want to attract it, but if you're not kind of walking the walk or talking the talk, it's very hard to keep the individual. So I think
Yes.
the biggest thing is that companies need to start investing in like a very competitive and kind of going back to the last answer as well, competitive, appealing, and strong benefit package that number one attracts, but also retains that talent around the globe. So again, having like a nuanced offering where if you can offer this specific benefit in the region, well, can you go ahead and offer a supplementary one like a wellness allowance where they can expense yoga or a gym membership or have the freedom to spend that money as they deem fit in their day-to-day lives, right? So we see up to 56% lower attrition rates when employee benefits are actually added onto our clients' packages for our end users. And obviously that makes them feel safe, and makes them feel happy, and they're typically much more productive as a result. So it's important to have this regardless if you're a company that's having everyone in office or 100% remote. I'd say that's the biggest one overall.
So I was just having a bit of a thought around um, if there's anything different that you need to do with tech talent to general talent. Sorry, I don't know if there would be a difference, but is there something you need to do specifically for tech talent?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yes and no. I think the biggest thing, right, like from a tech talent perspective, um, well, I guess it depends on a couple of things, right? Like it's providing the best like work experience and work environment for the individual. If you're going ahead and potentially hiring someone that's going to be like in sales, right, and working abroad, they may not require all the same hardware or the same setup as someone that needs like three monitors and three screens and a very robust setup. So I think being able to go ahead and have those benefits, like I mentioned, where it could be like a per diem that they can go ahead and spend as they deem fit on office setup or work from home allowance or whatever it might be, to make their lives a little bit more comfortable and make them feel like you're thinking about their wellness overall is going to kind of tie into that. But no, I wouldn't say that it's different based on the individual as a whole. But to that point, probably about 85% of the employees that we hire through Deal are tech talent, based on obviously things like Brexit and COVID. More and more tech talent has moved abroad, where they've identified that we don't need to be in a physical location or an office, every day to get our job done or to be extremely productive. Well, in fact, 47% of people, say that they don't want to return to the office, and they want to, remain working abroad because they're far more productive and better quality of life and whatnot. So it's a wide spread, but most of the companies that we're dealing with right now are in the tech focused sector that are hiring tech abroad. So it's probably head on.
Okay. Out of interest, when you are hiring remotely, do you find that companies base what they want to offer remote people modeled on the home base, if that makes sense? It's like, this is what we did in our home base, so this is what we want to make it equal to remotely. And how do you sort of advise them? And you've just mentioned that it's good to kind of keep it like, if you don't offer this, top it up with something like that. But do you find companies model on themselves as the home base?
Yeah, they do. I think like a lot of like these companies that have really strong kind of headquartered cultures where they again have things like catered lunches or barista, or they're a startup where they have competitive like ping pong tournaments and what have you in office. It's really hard to go ahead and replicate that specifically for remote hires. There's things that they can go ahead and try to bring with them. Obviously, the do a couple transplant that are going to bring the company culture over. But I don't think it's necessarily the environment that creates that. And I think that's what a lot of companies want to go ahead and recreate when they hire abroad. And a lot of times, SMBs or mid-market companies don't want to invest in a physical location when they go ahead and hire abroad, right? They want people to have the freedom to potentially work remote, or there's not a big enough team to basically get a shared workspace or get a big workspace. So we do partner with companies like WeWork. So you can go ahead and give your remote hires and teams access to WeWork All Access, so they can go into any WeWork that they want. So in that sense, there's things that you can carry over. So if everyone's going to a WeWork, I mean, they have ping pong tables, they have beer cart Thursdays, or beer cart every day. So
Nothing wrong
exactly,
with that.
there's nothing wrong with virtual ping pong. So no, I think some companies do really try to do it, but we have to advise them that sometimes you can't. Sometimes based on the type of hire or the certain um, rules in that country from an office perspective. If you're again the one providing the office for them to go ahead and work in, and you're paying the rent, that could bridge the lines of who the employer is. So in that case, that's why we use things like WeWork. So there's things like that we do to mitigate the risk for our clients. But yeah, everyone wants what everyone else has. So it's case by case in that sense.
Okay. So interestingly, from our hiring reports in Netherlands, developers said that one of the most common benefits is commute compensation. And in South Africa, they said it is about the bonuses. From a deal perspective, what are the benefits that tech talent are most interested in? What have you experienced?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good one. I love the commute benefit, right? So for tech talent, yeah, it's interesting one. Again, I think it comes down to like what the individual needs. Like I'm kind of repeating myself here, but like it's like what is that individual going to find compelling to them from a benefit perspective? And I think it's up to the company to, number one, do like an audit of what benefits or what they're providing internally, but also like hear what the individual wants, like in the interview process or when they do relocate. Okay, like what is going to make you happy? Obviously we can't go ahead and give you all the things that you have now, but is it going to be 250 USD a month to go ahead and cover e-learning or courses or whatever it might be? So I think it's, again, case by case based on the individual. So you really have to tap into what it is that they want, or what's going to compel them to potentially get hired or work remote, or make them happy. But it's it's not a one size fits all, really. I wish it was. That would make it easy for all of us. Yeah. Exactly. I think really it's transparency and trust, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
companies too, they can't go ahead and give like these crazy packages that other companies can or can do. So what you have to do is just be transparent. If there is a certain amount that you're allocating to an individual or to a company on a monthly, weekly, annual basis to go ahead and spend, or you're enrolling them in certain benefits, be transparent as to why that decision was made. Don't, because there's always going to be people that are happy with what they have, and there's always going to be people that are somewhat disappointed. If you advise them on why it is you made that decision as a company, and as you scale and grow, or as things change, you're going to continuously put best foot forward to better that, then they're going to be okay with it. And if they're not, well, you can't make everyone happy, but you can certainly explain it to them and be very transparent on it, to make sure that at least they have the best insight into why that decision was made.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've also got a really cool question here from Robin. Could be like a hot topic. Do you at Deal see, or do you see companies clear differences between cost of living adjustments? Because it also might be specific around benefits and commutes and all of those things. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we see quite a bit of it, specifically around relocations and whatnot. I mean, again, as a focus on the UK, we work with a lot of companies that potentially have hires in the UK that are now relocating to Spain or Malta or the UAE or wherever, and often they're going ahead and saying, okay, well, I'm paid let's say 100,000 GBP in Singapore. That's equivalent to like 5x potentially what the cost of living is. I have no idea, I'm making that number up, right? But obviously the company is going to go ahead and say, well, the cost for us to hire an individual in that country is far less than making that transplant. So there's obviously cost discrepancies and what have you, that they have to go ahead and take into account. So there is, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. It really depends on the country that they're moving to. We can help advise on that. So we have a really cool tool called Salary Insights that we've just launched on Deal that basically shows you what the what the low, median, and high, sorry, I can speak today, low, median, and high pay is for that job on the Deal platform. So as you're going through the contract creation setup and you're potentially hiring through Deal, it'll go ahead and say, okay, this person's at market value or it's lower. And then we launched another cool tool, which again we'll share after this tool, called Hiring Insights, which again will look at inflation, the cost of living, all these sort of watch outs when you're either making that relocation happen or hiring a net new person. So again, case by case, depending on where they're going. Typically, they try to keep it as standard as possible. Typically, it is going to be a sore spot for that person, especially if you're potentially lowering their wages or not giving them the 1.5x that currency is worth in that region. But we, again, as long as you're making the decision and informing them as to why the decision is being made using the data that you have accessible, whether it be through Deal or through partners. Typically, they understand. It doesn't mean they're always going to be happy with it, but again, you're advising them and being very transparent on what the process is going to be.
Yeah, I think that can be quite a common problem, especially when you do your first remote hire. You do X 1 times X 10 times X, and then go, "Ooh, okay."
They're living next to the Kardashians in like Bali or something because they're paid 100x what market rate is. You never know. Yeah.
And just aside, is that the tools that you've mentioned and the insights, is that for employers who chat to you or clients that chat to you or consumers as well? So could a candidate kind of go in and play with a tool like that as well?
They can, yes, they can. So I think on that, it's good because again, it's transparency. It's not like they're going to go ahead and go in and get like a totally different rate than you would based on the scope that you've input, right? So, it's again being transparent. It's like, okay, this is a company that's gone from 0 to 100 million in revenue, that they've hired 150,000 people on the platform in 20 months. We have quite a bit of data. We work with some of the biggest and fastest growing companies in the world. So all of that data is compiled in an easily accessible tool. So it just makes it very clear to whether it be the individual or the employer, exactly how the data was received. And it's super easy to use. So we'll share that after as well.
That sounds amazing. Just want to jump a little bit back. We've chatted quite a bit about hiring and benefits and stuff, but a little bit more around the retention side. I think, in our previous Untold Stories, we've chatted with Yika from Ubiquity. We've chatted to Ozgun from Katowiki in the March Untold Stories. How does Deal go about retaining remote tech talent? So really focusing and honing in on retention on that side. What do you guys
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest kind of ask from our remote tech team and our tech talent as a whole is, I think actually, to take a step back, what attracts a lot of individuals to join Deal is the fact that we really, drink our own champagne, as I say, rather than eat our own dog food. Is that we really enable people to bring their best selves to work wherever that might be, right? We're not going to force someone to come into the office. If someone wants to potentially work in Spain for 6 months and then jump to, Bali or Indonesia or wherever, we're not going to silo them on that. So I think that in itself attracts a certain type of individual that does want the freedom to do their best work, but do it how they deem fit and how they choose to do it. So for us, I can only speak to kind of our experience, is that I think that's been a massive retention tool. I think on retention right now as well, if you think about, the mass exodus and what's going on in all these kind of key hubs, is that people do want the flexibility to work abroad or work how they deem fit, work from home, not be forced back into the office, or they feel like they're not appreciated or trusted as a result of potentially being forced back. So I think in itself, remote work or the ability for allowing people to work abroad or work how they deem fit is a benefit in itself that's going to lead to quite a bit of retention. So I think that's probably something that we see quite a bit, because obviously we allow companies to do that. So it's often, as a result of something happening at the business. The other massive retention aspect is really fostering a really strong company culture. And it kind of sounds like a cop out, right? But I think the biggest thing is that when a company potentially doesn't have a strong company culture, then people aren't married to the company, they're not tied to the company, they don't feel like there's a north star or a vision that they're bought into, which makes it very easy and very easy choice for these employees to potentially leave and go to companies that are far more compelling or potentially have that north star or that vision. So if it's something that a company needs to focus on and kind of build, then it needs to be done immediately. It can't be something that they put on the back burner. If company culture is suffering, it needs to be top of mind and a massive focus. So I think those are the two that Deal's really gotten right. And because we are growing so fast, we don't get it right all the time, but we are founder led still. So, Alex and Shwo are still involved in every, hire I've ever made. So they're, the two last interviews are with the two co-founders, and, Deal's obviously their baby, and they've been a massive part of its growth over the last, 20, 21 months. So
Nice.
there's always a North Star, and the founders are always great people to measure whether or not this person is going to be a fit or they're bought into the vision. So if you do have access to those people that potentially set that North Star in the sky and that are kind of leading the disciples to a certain degree, involve them in the
Yeah,
process. Make sure you're speaking to them. Make sure that your teams are speaking with them, so that way your teams feel like they are bought in or involved in the process. Small things that you can do that really go a long way, I think, especially as you continue to grow, or if you look to expand or potentially retain talent, or are worried about retaining talent, right? So that's a
yeah.
couple things.
I'm just sitting here watching. I think I told you at the beginning, I'm in load shedding here in South Africa, and I'm watching my picture getting darker and darker. I had a roaring fire, which is now, it was helping with the light, but apologies, guys, if it's getting a bit dark here. So if I go darker and darker, the sun is starting to go down here in Cape Town. So, okay, so we've got a really great question here from Deborah, another Deborah, not me. How do you keep culture without diluting as you grow? That's such a good one, a difficult one.
Yeah, that's something that's very topical and top of mind, especially when you're hiring at pace like we are. Um, Well, a couple of things. So I think the biggest thing is constantly being involved in potential decision-making process, or just making people's voices heard is one thing, where they do feel like they are part of the culture, where they are shaping, what the day-to-day activities are. They're enjoying themselves. But I think it also comes back to the team as a whole, right? So every week we have a Thursday all hands where, we get on a call and we talk, and there's a presentation, and sometimes it could be someone based in Spain or the Dubai or Ireland, and they go ahead and give a 20-minute session on what it's like living in their country. So although you could be in your mom's basement in Canada like I am right now, or in London, you're learning about different people and different cultures of your teammates across the world. So although we're working, worlds apart, there's still that very strong company culture and that kind of sense of identity that we're all kind of one team with one dream. So I think having like fun things, but also serious things about product developments and product releases and what's next and board meetings and what have you, is always nice to keep them in the loop as well and be transparent. If you think about a lot of companies, they typically have decisions made at the board level or high up, trickles down, and there's no insight into why that decision was made. We're very transparent in that sense. We have to be, or else again, that company culture is going to be diluted very quickly. So I say that's
Yeah.
one component. The second component is allowing teammates to go ahead and potentially travel or get abroad and meet people face to face. Again, I have a massive team in the UK, but a lot of them have decided to go ahead and jump from Ireland to Spain for the summer and all those sorts of things. So we do allow the freedom to do that, so they can go ahead and meet these colleagues, and potentially learn things, and be a part of different squads or teams for the summer months, and then come back home and they share those learnings, which again better the culture, and whatnot as a whole. So just small things like that, like really kind of instilling it in the team, typically reduces dilution. But as a company grows, right, at a certain point you're going to hit that you know like publicly traded, we'll say corporate structure. It's tough to avoid that. I've been a part of a couple where it's like get away, yeah. I've been a part of a couple kind of transitions like that. And again, it's not for everyone, right? Like it's not going to be,
No.
but you can't, yeah, you can't solve it for everyone. So I'd say those are just a
Just
couple of
like
things that you can do.
mentioning on your first point around the all hands. Wow, it's just it's an amazing way to keep people connected to what's happening. We do one on a Monday as well, and I mean, I just avoid missing it like the plague. I'm just like, I want to be there, want to see the people. What are people doing? I flip through the Zoom screen, like look at everybody. It's really great. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
great way to stay connected and kind of just keep everybody kind of connected.
Yeah, it was hot. I think we were using I think we grew so fast that I think we maxed out the number of people we can invite, so we moved to Hopin. But I think the chat during these all hands is probably the funniest thing. If someone makes like, an error, or the slide doesn't go to the next one, or they're on mute for a couple of minutes. It's pretty funny, and although you're not speaking to people on the chat directly, you almost get a sense of like what these individuals are like in real life, and who's got the sense of humor and whatnot. So it's quite nice.
Brilliant. We've got a really great question here. There's a couple of more audience questions, but we'll see how far we can get. I can see we're getting close to 6 o'clock, or on 6 o'clock, but all good for now. Interesting one from Robin. She wants to know more around the retention side. If you've noticed a slowdown in hiring ahead of a potential global recession. So, and if you have you got any insights such as which locations or industry or stage of the organization that you are picking up these slowdowns in hiring? That's a bit doom and gloomish, but it's potentially true.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, right, if we look at like a lot of the tech companies that have been affected as of late, typically, that's a good question. I don't know if I can give like a very clear answer. I think the teams that are mostly affected, right, when it does come to, well, number one, depends on the type of company you're in, right? So first and foremost, if you're a very tech-driven company, and there is a recession coming, your development team is probably not going to be the team that there's going to be a slowdown on. It might be sales hires and sales development or business development reps that are going out and the front lines. Yes, Robin, you're putting me on the spot. I can see you there. It is a very data-driven question. So it really depends on like the company and where headcount's needed and what future growth plans are. Obviously, if you're thinking of being like a 100-year company, you're going to constantly want to develop and innovate and have tech talent on hand or potentially hire around those roles. So we don't often see a slowdown on that sense. It's more from what can we 10x? We can't go ahead and 10x a development person's man hours or get them to stay up 6 days or 7 days straight to go ahead and code. So obviously that's not a role that you can go ahead and slow down on to a certain degree. But there are tools out there that do enable companies to go ahead and 10x from like an outreach perspective or sales perspective, or if your company's not, if other companies aren't buying your product, then there's a bunch of different things. Yeah, you're really putting me on the spot here, but it really depends.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Was asking to see if you maybe had any sort of on the top of your mind kind of data. It's a bit of a data question, so probably need more research and kind of delving in.
We do. I mean, we obviously have like our global hiring report that we publish every quarter, but it's mostly around like where like people are finding the benefits of remote work and what roles are being hired and what have you. If I can go ahead and touch on those points, tech hiring has not slowed down whatsoever. It's definitely kind of our bread and butter. So we're seeing over 50% of the hires in Latin America, Eastern Europe being hired through Deal, being in tech and engineering across the business. It's I think I referenced 85% or so earlier. So it's still massive. Other roles are obviously like customer success and what have you. So first and foremost, you obviously want to go ahead and provide the best experience for your client. So you're not going to bootstrap those roles. It's typically the ones that you can kind of live without for a certain point of time.
Awesome.
Oh, she's writing again. I'm watching.
No, they're awesome. Keep them coming. We've got one or two other questions from the audience here. Another one from Deborah, not me, the other one. Question is a little bit more technical, but would be awesome if we could have it covered. So maybe we're putting you on the spot again. Sorry, Matt, but let's try.
No worries.
If Deal is the employer of an FTE and pays the wages and tax, etc., how is the client charged by deal? And
Yeah,
then
great
there's a double
question.
question. Also, how about the employment law side of things? Would the employer deal be responsible if anything went wrong?
Yeah, good question. So I think what's made deals extremely successful on this is because we are the employer of record. We're required to go ahead and take into account the mandatory benefits and remit taxes for that full-time hire on your behalf. We don't take a portion of the person's pay. Like I think a lot of companies will say if you pay someone, let's say, 100,000 GBP a year, they're going to take like 5%. If you pay them more than that, then they're taking like 7%, which ultimately means that it's limiting how much you're paying the individual, or it's a deterrent to paying them more, which I think is kind of a weird one. So what we do is we charge a flat fee on a monthly basis, regardless if they're paid, £1 million or 100,000. It doesn't matter to us. It's 599 USD per full-time employee per month. Very transparent. There's no sort of setup fee or anything along those lines. There is a deposit that you pay. So if you do ever miss a payment to deal where we then pay your employee on your behalf, we're still able to pay them on your behalf. So they're not missing, pay dates, and we're of course liable on that front. So we need to make sure
Yeah.
that both you and us are covered. But it's standard, right? So I think that's again one of the biggest kind of say unique selling features of Deal is that we're very transparent. It's very predictable. If you're going to go ahead and hire someone through Deal, it's going to be X amount. You can forecast 50 hires, 100 hires, whatever you need through that. It's very transparent. The second question there, second point of that was if you can repeat it.
So the second part was also about the employment law side of things. Would the employer deal be responsible
Right.
if anything went wrong legally?
Yeah, so from a tax, so let's say like everything behind the scenes from like a tax and payroll perspective, yes, we are liable in that sense. Obviously, we're not the ones that are going ahead and providing like the physical location or the work environment for the individual. So that would still sit with the client. So for example, if someone goes out and smashes a laptop or something like that in a physical environment, like we can't stop that. So that would still sit with the client that is working with Deal. We don't take care of any of the day-to-day management of the individual. We do advise on HR related matters such as offboarding or benefits or taxes if either you or them need it, but they would still report into the line manager or the hiring manager that you've appointed to them within your organization.
Okay, brilliant. Deborah, no stress. Don't apologize for being in HR. These
No,
are
it's great.
super
It's great. No.
Those are awesome questions. Thank you. We are going to come to our last question now. This one is from Joan. Joan wants to know, what are the most overlooked costs that a hiring manager fails to factor in when they start thinking about remote hiring?
Good question.
Hiring.
Very good question. I think the most overlooked cost typically isn't with Deal, right? So it's not so much with Deal because again, like I said, we're very transparent in our costs. It's going to be $599 per month per full-time employee. It's typically on the expansion cost of hiring an individual in another country. So the cost to hire in said region based on the specific benefits. For example, if you go ahead and hire someone in South Africa, it's 3% of whatever they're paid. So if you're paying them 100,000 South African rand, it's 103,000 to go ahead and enroll them in all the mandatory benefits in the region, which makes it a very good place to hire because it's a low cost to potentially, get new talent in that country. Meanwhile, if you look at, France, it's 48 to 52% of the employee's salary that the company then has to factor into those benefits that they're going to now pay. So the cost to hire the individual above their salary is 50% of whatever they're paid. So those are things that typically companies might agree to go ahead and relocate someone, and then when they start looking into due diligence or looking into it, it's a non-starter because it's effectively doubling what they can afford potentially. But the other costs on that are the cost to hire. If you potentially like lose someone or need to offboard them in that country, right? So, for example, if you potentially relocate someone to somewhere like a France, the cost to offboard them, well, they're probably going to be working for you until they potentially retire. It's a very difficult country to go ahead and offboard people to and from unless there's little things like that that they don't factor in if they do potentially make a mistake. We're there to advise on it. We're obviously there to guide you through it and to answer all your questions. We don't expect you to be geniuses or experts on every country that you hire in. Because we do have entities in 85 plus different countries, that means that we have to have physical people located there to advise and set it up. So we do have employee experience team members. So for example, if I'm dealing with, a client that has a question about, Romania, I'm going ahead and asking that employee experience team member to speak to the company and advise them. I'm not going to go ahead and be giving like blanketed answers. They're going to be aware of the laws and the nuances of each country. The typical thing is what they don't realize is, okay, how much is it going to actually cost us from tax
Yeah.
perspective to hire, and then if something does go wrong, what's the cost to potentially exit this person or offboard them, and what's the cost of finding new talent. So that could also play into your retention strategy as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. That was a really cool, interesting question.
It was, yeah, it was a good
Also,
one.
super chuffed. We've actually managed to get through all the questions. I think that is it as far as I can see. It's so awesome to see such a cool, engaged audience. The audience is really what shapes these types of events. And of course, we obviously want you to get the most out of these events. So thank you so much for all the questions, all the engagement. Matt, you've been fantastic. After the webinar closes, we are going to be sharing those bits and bobs with you. Or I'm actually not quite sure if we share it in here or afterwards, but either which way, we will be sharing them with the audience. And thank you very, very much. It's a bit of a wrap. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And again, if anyone has any questions about anything, again, feel free to reach out to OfferZen or LinkedIn me, and I can send you any sort of supporting documents if you missed it. But yeah, I loved all the questions. Thank you so much for putting me on the spot as well. It was a lot of fun, and looking forward to the next one. Thanks so much.
For my phone lasting during the whole webinar.
Yeah, I mean that's a good sales pitch for your provider. So good stuff.
Absolutely. And in Pringle Bay, remember?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, beautiful Pringle Bay. Yeah. If anyone's never looked up Pringle Bay, it is gorgeous. I think if you do have the ability to work anywhere, it's at the top of my list now. So
awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.